So what happens in a ZIA authentication enrollment process? So if you think about it, client connector is stateless, right? So unlike Netscope, we don't bake our like identity as a token or something, into the client to client connector. So with client connector, when client connector first fires up, it doesn't know which cloud it should be talking to. It doesn't know where to even go to authenticate the user, right? It doesn't know what policies to apply. It really doesn't know anything. It has to get all of that from the cloud. Now, you can uh, you can actually, when configuring or deploying client connector, there are a few things that you can include in there, right, to cut down on some of these steps. But all in all, we have to have a lot of conversations that happen. We have to have a lot of security that also happens to make sure that we know it's a client connector, our client connector talking to us, and the client connector knows it's Zscaler that is talking to as well, right? So I wanted to take you through a mid-level view of this, right? So the very last client connector, in the middle, we have mobile admin, right? Mobile admin is in our cloud, that's what's actually enrolling client connector. That's where you will typically go manage your client connector, get data, for client connector. The ZIA, in this case, the service, and on the very right is the IDP, right? So the first thing that happens when client connector fires up, if you don't use a user domain flag, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to make you enter a username and password. I'm going to take your domain, like ndata at whatever.com, and I'm going to go and see which Zscaler cloud does whatever.com live in, right? So that's one step that it has to go figure out from mobile admin. You give it the user, the cloud name, it doesn't need to do that, right? But that's the first thing. The second thing is, how do I authenticate the user? So mobile admin itself is going to say, hey, this is the SAML SSL page that you need to redirect to. This is talking to client connector to go and start the authentication process. Now, client connector will go ahead and it will create an instance of a web-based control, right? A web control on Mac OS. It would be the WebKit, the Safari, right? But basically, it's a web browser on the system itself. It's not ours. That's just simply running there to facilitate this authentication. So what we'll do is we'll say, client connector will say, okay, I now know where to send my user to authenticate. I'm going to go ahead and take that redirect, and I'm going to forward that request over to the IDP, whatever that IDP is. Now, in this case, we are no longer part of the active conversation, right? Because it's the user talking to the IDP. Now, why do I bring that up? The reason why I bring that up is we aren't going to control, or do want to control, anything happening within that IDP. All we really want at the end of the day is find out, did the authentication succeed or did it fail? If the authentication succeeded, we also then want to know, okay, what are the SAML assertions that came through, right? What is the IDP telling us about the identity and the attribute of that user that I now need to, I being client connector, need to take and forward back to ZIA. Okay. We don't care if there was MFA happening at the IDP. We don't care if they're banging two rocks together. It really doesn't matter, right? So the reason why I bring this up is I want silent enrollment and silent authentication with client connector. How come you guys can't do that, right? And the short answer is we absolutely can do that, right? You need to make sure you have that seamless sign-on enabled in the first place. And then we absolutely will go ahead and hook into it, right? And secondly, you can give them the URLs to say, okay, I'll tell you what, this request that went out to your IDP, I'll send you the URL. Can you shut down client connector? Can you just fire up this particular URL and tell me, are you prompted or not? If you aren't being prompted, great. That means we need to maybe take a look at the configuration on the client connector side. If you are being prompted, that means the you have to solve that seamless SSO issue, right? Because we aren't a SSO solution. We hook into it. All right. So the next thing after that is we validate that the SAML assertion came from a trusted IDP, right? Also, then we issue a auth token that's our own that we save, encrypt, and save within a file within Client Connector. We take the original SAML cookie from the IDP and say, we toss it. And after that, we will go ahead and start the enrollment process, register the device with mobile admin, right? And then that's when you will see your the Client Connector page pop up right after that. So we know we have registered, and once we register, what we also will receive is a set of digest credentials, okay, that we then use for every request that goes out to ZIA. So for every request that goes out to ZIA, every connect header, we will, which actually uses a 407 proxy auth, we will use that particular digest credentials to authenticate against the Zscaler cloud to make sure, that we can mutually authenticate each other there as well. The key thing here that I want to point out to you guys is a garbage can, right? So when a customer says, wait a minute, I have set my IDP to re-auth your ZIA every week. Why isn't that happening? Well, that's because we filed your SAML cookie somewhere where we don't use it. We don't use it. Frankly speaking, we don't use it. There's really isn't a need to re-authenticate for ZIA. This is the ZPA view. I won't go through the whole thing. I'll just mention two things about the ZPA side of things, a little bit different. One is we do go ahead and generate a fingerprint, and we create a CSR, which after successful authentication gets signed off by a ZPA broker. And we then in turn use that certificate that just got signed as a way to create an M tunnel, right? Because remember, every request for ZPA to a ZPA resource requires an M tunnel, and every M tunnel uses the signed certificate that we just received from the ZPA broker. So please keep that in mind. I set my IDP to force you to re-auth access to ZPA or to my ZPA applications every hour. Why isn't that working? Well, the reason why that's working is because we key and we follow re-authentication timeouts based on the ZPA re-auth policy, not the IDPs. And you can just tweak the existing ZPA auth policy to reflect that. And then boom, you're back to the races.